On the second day of development, we do actually sort out the embryos according to their rate of development, putting the better ones cluster together, and so on according to quality and rate of development we put into different wells. No renewal of medium moving forward. No physical changeover of medium on day 3 or 4 using this approach. So, observations with this as we move forward. The embryos definitely develop quicker in embryo choice, some 12 to 16 hours earlier, based on the studies that we've done in the embryoscope. And in fact, based on early uterine lavage studies back in the early 80s out of Texas, where in vivo fertilized eggs, that is, women having sex and donating their embryos as the blastocyst stage were washed out of the uterus, you actually found that on day 4, early blastocysts were forming. So what we're seeing with this earlier cavitation and blast formation in the embryo choice, we feel is mimicking more an in vivo developmental approach. We see more compaction here on day 3, and as I said, more cavitation on day 4 than we ever saw with SAGE. Some people, it's become sort of dogma in our industry, in IVF, that fast-moving embryos on day 3 are more aneuploid. But this paper was one of the first to actually debunk that and say that there is no increase in aneuploidy rate of fast-cleaving embryos. The fact that they reach the blastocyst stage at a similar rate, and maybe even faster than the slower embryos on day 3, does not seem to be problematic, and we would tend to agree. The very practical outcome of this is we vitrify many more embryos on day 5. We no longer push any of our blastocyst transfers to day 6 because we're not getting blastocysts by day 5. And we've eliminated vitrification of blastocysts on day 7 because we've speeded things up. The assessment of the embryos in this medium is much more clear-cut. It's clearer. We refer to it as either the embryo is hot or not. There is much less gray area. Some embryos do have some pitting in the cytoplasm. We are not concerned with this because it does not, in our hands, impact on implantation outcomes. And in fact, ongoing, we seem to be getting overall higher implantation and pregnancy rates from this medium. It is a true single-step medium without renewal, can be used from insemination all the way through. It's ideal for time-lapse applications where you just want to leave your embryos unmolested in the incubators for days. Very convenient. You're just using one medium for ordering, stocking, and storage. There's less waste. Reduction in costs overall in terms of consumable. Less media used and less dishes used. Labor reduction. And in our lab, one technician will take up to 4 hours a day making dishes for the subsequent day's utilization. We've reduced that by some 30 to 40 minutes a day, which is, in a large program, very significant benefit. Reduced movement of embryos, less manipulation, perhaps means there's less loss of embryos or contamination potential. And overall, we feel that it's important that the reduction in embryo stress by using one medium throughout will not expose the embryos to high levels of stress during changing media contents or osmotic concentrations or change in pH or temperature drift when embryos are moved between media. Bottom line here is we feel that in our own lab, and perhaps yours too, that it's time to question, rethink the two-step sequential medium dogma. I'll spend another 4 or 5 minutes, if this is okay with my audience here. This is the traditional morphological one snapshot approach we take to embryo assessment. Once or at most twice a day, the embryos will be taken out of the incubator and looked at. But ultimately, what you're looking at is just a single snapshot, as we would say in English. It's a beauty contest, but with the power of the embryoscope, the potential to, if I can find my mouse, click, see things which are, if you're an embryologist, you'll see here a nice 4-cell embryo may not look quite so nice an hour or two later. Or it's in the process of cleaving, or in this case, fertilized egg sitting there just suddenly looks like this or like that. At any point that you look at that embryo, depending on that snapshot, it goes from looking like a normal embryo, a healthy one, or not so normal. Here, resorbing cells. Here we go from 1 to 3 cells, very abnormal, then back to 2 cells. Just depending on when you take this embryo out of the, then it looks nice again. But you may choose that embryo as the one you transfer. This powerful tool is enabling us to move much beyond the original beauty contest. And I put it to you, find the peach or the apricot in this particular shot. Not very politically correct, but really it's just a question of a beauty contest, as I mentioned earlier. Now, in recent years, there has been, fortunately, an increased focus on single embryo transfer in the United States, referred to as elective single embryo transfer, because patients have many more than one embryo, but we want to just put back one to reduce twinning rates. And here you can see over the last decade a slow but nevertheless inexorable rise in single embryo transfers in especially the donor egg population, but even in the patients using their own eggs. We're not there yet, but we feel the blastocyst transfer for us, and certainly this new culture medium is assisting the process enormously. I won't dwell too much on this slide, but this is based on a large amount of data presented a year or so back at the ASRM in Colorado. But this is just simply a slide which looks at the efficiency of how many eggs or oocytes it takes to make a live-born baby. And it's amazing, while we congratulate ourselves on how good we are, when you break it down according to maternal age, 1% of all eggs makes a baby in this age range, 2% here, 3%, 4%, 5%. Only 5 babies from every 100 eggs that are retrieved in this population. And even in the optimum circumstances of donor eggs, look how poorly we do. Only 6.5%. 6.5 babies from every 100 donor eggs retrieved. So there are efficiencies which can be improved. If we take it from the fertilized egg stage, only 7.5% of all fertilized eggs end up making a baby. Very inefficient. I just want to show you another quick video. This is certainly an approach which I struggle with enormously, but having moved away from day 3 embryo biopsy for aneuploidy chromosomal screening, we now move to the blastocyst more routinely in the United States to pull out a few cells from the trophectoderm, the trophoblast, which is technologically an easier approach than a day 3 biopsy, but this is assisted using the laser to first make a hole in the zona pellucida, but then eventually to start cutting with the laser through the microscope, breaking the cell bonds here, the cell junctions, to release the cells for us to run 24 chromosome analysis. I'll not dwell any more on that, but using that tool, and I use this to refer back to the benefits of earlier blastocyst formation, a clinic I work with in Delaware has undertaken a great study. This was presented in Orlando ASRM meeting in October. But what they looked at was the euploidy rate, the normal chromosomal rate, using 24 chromosome microarray. And here, relative to the day of blastocyst formation, and this is in SAGE culture medium, day 5, day 6, day 7. Look at this amazing negative trend of euploidy. By day 7, only 20% or so of embryos are chromosomally normal. Look how many are clearly aneuploid. So what this says is faster forming blastocysts are more normal. And this just shows the same data relative to maternal age and agrees with the classic idea that with younger patients you have higher rates of euploid normal embryos versus older patients, higher rates of aneuploid abnormal embryos. A couple of minutes just to indulge me here, but I'm fascinated by the improvements in incubation systems over the year. This is the incubator, the desiccator, in which Louise Brown was grown in I still get my numbers wrong, 1977, to be born in 1978. This is my little play. Maybe in another millennium we will be out there with Star Wars using the Beastmaster incubator, but enough of that. What we did in our lab, which took a lot of money and a lot of effort, was to move away from big box incubation in 2009 to this, the mini incubators. And the benefits of these mini incubators, and I won't dwell on this slide, but the bottom line here is that the big box incubators, the formers here, have a much slower recovery in terms of everything from temperature to gas, with a recovery of 15 times longer than mini incubators. However, even in a busy program like Shady Grove, where we put up to 8 patients in these things, we discovered that maybe even mini incubation can be problematic. We have, for the first few months, month or two, when we utilized these incubators, we tracked the utilization of the left and the right bank of incubators, and what we found was that the left side of incubators got utilized more than the right-hand bank of incubators. And then when we tracked the blastocyst formation rate in the busier incubators, it was suppressed versus those used less often. So clearly less disturbance of even the incubation environment is better. So less in and out opening of incubators without changing medium, like in embryo choice. Less disturbance means more blastocyst forming, and more impactfully, ultimately, higher rates of implantation in quieter embryo incubation. And just jokingly, we looked at the utilization of the left and the right incubators, and we found that, damn, the right-hand lid was being opened up to 3 times more than the left-hand side of the lid. And when we reviewed all the lab staff, 82% of the lab were right-handed. So we offered them the option: we either chop off your right hand or you get fired, and it was 50-50. We now have just one-handed embryologists, but we got everyone to be, 50-50 in terms of their opening. So, joking aside, in conclusion, thanks to time-lapse micrography, we've been able to develop and very with an exacting approach to the ability to develop this single-step medium, and we feel that during this process, enabling us with observations without disturbing the culture environment, using this new medium, we provide an environment for the embryos which comes much closer to what Henry Release referred to as the quiet embryo hypothesis.